Is college really necessary? Can you learn things by yourself? Do boot camps work?
Introducing Ranadeep Singh, 10-time hackathon champion, MLAI software
See
expert.
people doing one mistake all the time that I see people regretting is that
Hey everyone, with us today is Ranadeep Singh, who started automating chip design workflows at Samsung, optimized GPU performance at Qualcomm, then earned his master's in AI and innovation from Carnegie Mellon. At StubHub, he created AI-powered code review automation, and now he's a senior AI engineer developing Copilot features from Microsoft's data platform. Really excited to dive in. Welcome, Ranadeep.
Well, thank you for having me. I think that was a pretty good rundown of a bunch of things I've done throughout my career. And as I like to say, I think my greatest work is always ahead of me. So I've done more to do, but really excited to be in the space of working with copilots, agents, LLMs, all of that fun stuff.
Can you give a 1-minute overview of where you're at right now, and then what you're doing and what's your role? And then we'll dive into the basket.
Sure. So I'm currently at Microsoft, specifically in Microsoft Fabric, which is Azure's data platform. And so this is a pretty new product that Microsoft came out with towards the end of 2023, where this is supposed to be like a combined data platform with all the way from the data pipelines to the data science, which is SynapseML, which I'm part of, and then to the data visualization layer through Power BI. So I love what Microsoft was doing with this like combined platform and taking on industry giants like Snowflake and Databricks. And I liked what the team had to offer. So over the summer, I jumped ship. I joined Microsoft in July, and it was really promising to me, all these Copilot capabilities and working with these AI agentic workflows that I could work on and deliver really cool solutions for big data. And so my day in, day out is thinking about how do I apply LLMs to large data sets for customers? How do they get insights out of it? How do our LLMs work on these data? And just tons of open-ended problems.
Yeah, I feel like that's what a lot of people want to be doing these days. So it sounds like a cool job. So so we'll get back to this. Let's dive back to your past and start when you were in high school. And let's just talk about, did you see yourself going in this direction when you were in high school? What was going through your mind at that point in time?
Yeah, I think high school was a mixed bag. Like initially, I want to say like I was really into science. I really liked all aspects of it. At some point, like I want to say like towards like my junior year in high school, I was thinking I might even end up being a chemical engineer. And I was like still thinking, which direction should I head? I knew that I liked science. I knew that I wanted to do something in research, something scientific, but the career options were really open. At certain point, I want to say like towards, as I was getting into my senior year, I was directed towards a set of computer science and robotics. I was already studying computer science in high school, like towards the last 2 years. My school offered computer science, so I was doing data structures, algorithms, SQL, C++, all that fun stuff. But somehow and this was like back in 2012, by the way. So I was already like, on that lead code grind, you could always say that. So those things were just familiar to me. But instead of then going into a traditional computer science degree, I opted to go into electronics engineering for my undergrad. In India, where I went for undergrad, it is a thing that for the top schools and the top program is usually computer science because of like the higher packages, the higher salary, the job opportunities. And so when I was going into undergrad, like I had a very good rank. I could easily get computer science, but my passion at that point was studying electronics and robotics. And I felt like that would be a good path. So I went to Delhi Technological University in New Delhi, India for undergrad, where, again, as I mentioned, I studied electronics engineering. This is where I really got into A, robotics, B, electronics, and C, computer science also, because, again, all of these were branches of electronics engineering. And before computer science existed as a degree, it all used to be electrical engineering, which is what it branched off from. So I got to try out a bunch of things. I got to intern at really great companies like Toshiba and Samsung, eventually where I even joined at Samsung. And so my career path, I feel like at every point I tried many different things. And I was fortunate enough to be able to change directions that I felt right. And what really enabled me to change directions from, computer science to electronics to robotics to back to semiconductors and then today to software and AI was that at each step, I wasn't just focused on that I need to just do this one thing and I'm committed to it for life. I felt like every point I really relied on being like almost like jack of all trades and growing my skill set throughout. For example, what you started off about my intro, where I was doing semiconductor automation at Samsung. That was like my first proper full-time job after undergrad. At this role, even though I was working as a chip design engineer initially, I didn't give up my software scripting skills, like working with Python, shell scripting, all of that fun stuff. And I immediately, like even a month into the job, I realized that, hey, there's like a lot of automation to be had. Even though it's like beyond the scope of my work, I should just use my skill set here, even perhaps learn more things and just automate a ton of things to make my job easier and everyone's job easier within my team. So I think like at every point, maybe we can talk more about this. At every point in my career and life, almost all of it were mini inflection points where just rather than deciding to go 100% into that, I just try to grow myself holistically.
I like that mindset. So let's go back to high school you and just talk about the college career path. Okay, so the US, there's a lot of concern about going to college, or people are second guessing it because it's very expensive these days. And so from your perspective, was college always like an option, or what would you say to people thinking about going to college these days? Like, is it the right path for them?
I think for sure, like, of course, like culturally in India, like going to college is like almost like a given because like education is really, really emphasized in the culture, like so much so that when you go to college in India, you almost never pay for it yourself. Like it's like almost a given that your parents pay for it because that's like one of the things that they almost like do for you, which is like, I think a great part of the culture. But I think even beyond that being part of the culture, like regardless of India or whichever country, I think going to college itself like is definitely like a very, very good thing, especially in the field of engineering and computer science, AI, all of that fun stuff. Like, it's a growing field, but we need people with some kind of like structured knowledge. There's a lot that sure anyone can pick up React and JavaScript from a boot camp and be a developer and start making web apps and just be productive. Sure, that can really happen. But the best way to like grow in your career is by almost like having a good foundational layer of what are the basics, where did it come from, like how does multi-threading work, when different servers are talking to each other, what might happen. And some of these things like are taught in some of the most boring courses in college. Things like even computer architecture, what kind of like instruction set is running on the microprocessor itself, right? Like when you're studying these things, you don't really think that it's going to be really applied at whichever job you're going to do. But time and time again, like it comes back in terms of how do you make things more efficient. So I feel when you go to college or when you do a 4-year degree or 2-year master's program or anything like that, A, that structured knowledge really helps. But I think B, what really helps more is the network that you get while you're at the college. I can like look back to it now that, today if I want to look for a job, almost all of my colleagues and classmates who were with me in undergrad and grad school, they're working at these amazing firms. And I have like a really strong referral from them. And as they say, right, your network is your net worth. And that really, really justifies when they're willing to give you strong referrals. And I think there's a third point to it as well, given almost like how flooded the software job market is with talent these days, like so many people who can do boot camp and come into the market. In many cases, the way you can differentiate yourself from everyone else is by having solid credentials. And the way you can prove that to an employer or anyone else without even a hint of a doubt is by showing that, yeah, you went to college. Sounds super basic, but it really, really does certify.
Yeah, I like the point about the networking or having that network. I feel like that is very important. Once you get references. Okay, so you just were at the Samsung internship and then you graduated and then you went to Samsung full time. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. There was in between, there was another stint though. Like during my last year of college, over the winter break, I interned with Toshiba in Japan. And so this was quite interesting, an interesting opportunity because like almost for 2 months, I was in Japan working from their headquarters. I was working in these semiconductor labs, hands-on, and just like quite a different experience because this was in Japan. The working culture was very different. The people were super intelligent, super polite. Just the whole environment was very different. And I think I grew a lot as a person. I grew a lot, even in terms of like, how do I work in a lab? Because like, it was different than my earlier Samsung experience where I was still like in an office. I was still working on a computer. Like, I didn't have to be in a lab, handle chips, all of that fun stuff. I was like in the Toshiba internship, I had to like handle chips. I had to make custom circuit boards. I had to, of course, do things on the computer and do simulations. But then this was a more holistic experience, and I could see what happens on the manufacturing side, what happens on the testing side. And within 2 months, I got to learn a lot, and I think it was like just a brilliant opportunity.
Yeah, what was the most interesting thing about the chip manufacturing? Because I never seen it or been a part of it, and I'm curious.
I think, at least in my job function, what I did as like a what they call as a winter intern or like a global winter intern is that when the chips come out of manufacturing, there is a process where you want to almost like for any new chip that's not in mass production yet, there's a thing where the companies have to do some kind of like initial testing and benchmarking of that. That sure, like in our simulation, this is what we predicted the timing to be, the performance to be, or like this is what we thought about like the analog wavelengths, how much how much attenuation that might be as it's passed through the chip. So there are all these like simulation thoughts that happened before. And then once it comes out of the fab, once it comes out of manufacturing and it's packaged into like its final package that goes out to manufacturers, you need to do a bunch of testing to see actually how good is it? Like how well is it performing? Is it performing as per your expectations? So that part, you can almost say like it was a little bit of grunt work, but given at how early stage I was in my career, it was, I think, quite interesting, and I don't think I could ever experience it in any other way.
Yeah, I feel like that puts your mind in a different spot when you're starting to program or anything like that, because then you feel like you kind of understand where it's coming from.
Yeah, and I think I want to add to it, right? I think it's going for this was kind of like what I was alluding to earlier of like, I tried to grow myself holistically at every step. So even though the Toshiba thing wasn't, I want to say like exactly in line with what I wanted to do in the future, like what I was almost committed to, because by the time I went for this internship, I'd already committed to Samsung of like joining them full time after graduating. I still went for it. I still try to make my winter more productive by actually doing an internship rather than just sitting at home for a month or two. I try to just like do something out of my comfort zone and try to see like, hey, maybe this is a thing I like. Maybe I like living in Japan. Maybe I like working in a lab. Like all of those things, like I thought, what, I'll only know if I do it for a while. And of course, like because it was an internship, I was productive and I got paid for it as well. So that's, a win-win.
Yeah, it's a win-win. Yeah, I like the embracing curiosity with a growth mindset, because you never know. You never know what you're going to find interesting. Yeah. Or who you're going to meet. You never know. There's a lot of opportunity in that. All right. So then you went to Samsung. So can you talk about Samsung and then your careers after that? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So at Samsung, when I joined initially, I was working as a chip design engineer. I was working at many interesting projects within Samsung Foundry. So we were making chip designs for other companies, some like really, really top companies, part of Mag 7. I won't name which, but they were like really cutting edge engineering projects. Even though like I was working as a chip design engineer, making these cutting edge chips, I saw there was like a lot of low hanging fruit in terms of automating the processes. This was by just like writing simple Python scripts to basically join together different workflows so that they run one after each other. And rather than an engineer trying to run different simulations one after another, it could do multiple things from the ML pick up practices that were commonplace in the ML domain, things like hyperparameter tuning and grid search for hyperparameters. A lot of these techniques, because I already knew machine learning and all of these techniques, I saw that I could just apply it to my job of like being a chip design engineer as well and write scripts on how do I tune these hyperparameters by writing almost like a bunch of nested for loops where a grid search is happening for the best parameters and seeing which simulation results give me the best results. That was one of the first automations that I did at Samsung in the initial 6 months, which really, really saved me a lot of time, saved my team a lot of time, and that propelled me to get more and more hands-on work with software projects. Then fast forward to 2 years, like towards the end of my time at Samsung, I had completely moved to the software side. I was what they call also as like an expert software engineer. It's like a whole thing that is like an organization term, but I was like completely working on the firmware side. I was doing a bunch of automation, and that's how I also got my next opportunity. And this was at Qualcomm, again, another big semiconductor company. And people from Qualcomm, like the GPU design team, reached out to me, and they had a very interesting position in mind. So for me, like, they wanted someone to come in and do a bunch of automation around their benchmarking, around their processes, and just be almost like an embedded software person within the team of hardware design engineers, which was like a very cool opportunity for me because I was really passionate about GPUs back then. Even like before this, like, where we are at with the LLM era, like GPUs have always been cool. And especially this was like mobile GPUs that go into top Android phones or like even some Windows devices. So I felt this would be a very, very cool opportunity to advance mobile GPUs and see how I can apply automation to computing. And during this role at Qualcomm, I was moving away from just traditional automation, and I was doing more and more natural language processing, working with numbers, working with output data that was generated from these simulations. And I saw that the next phase in my automation or the glass ceiling that I was looking at was just doing more and more NLP on these output logs. And then just automate
So what
steps.
is NL?
Oh yeah, so NLP is natural language processing.
Okay.
So what I mean is these simulation tools, they put out tons of data, like some text data, some numbers, sometimes structured, sometimes unstructured. And so as a human who has context, who has intelligence, you can kind of make sense of like what's happening, right? Like if something's bad, if something's good, like what actions need to be taken. But back then, like back in like 2020, this was not commonplace. Like there was the NLP solutions really lacked in terms of like being able to take some actions and given some unstructured output. And so this became something that I became really interested in this research area. And I tried to implement a bunch of things at Qualcomm. But as I was doing that, I realized that, I need to do a lot. I need to study a lot more AI to be able to be good at this endeavor. And that's when I applied to grad school.
So you were using AI to optimize the production or testing of semiconductor chips that will also be used to run AI. Is that?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. You could say that. But I think rather than like test them, it was more about I was trying to use AI so that we produce even faster GPUs that could then run AI. Although like it was mobile GPUs, so it was more about people being able to play better mobile games on their Android phones. So not so much running AI yet, but you never know. I think it's a never-ending rat race, and I think that's why I'm so bullish about NVIDIA because they have such a good lead, and I think that's such an important technology that everyone needs right now, and will for forever, I guess. So that's how like I transitioned to the next part of my life. That again, like rather than just like doing my 9 to 5 job, like I tried to grow further. Like I was studying a lot of NLP, studying a lot of AI at my own free time, working with TensorFlow, working with like some Hugging Face models from Hugging Face. Just trying to understand like, okay, how do I basically make sense of this unstructured data? What models could I use? What techniques could I use? And while doing all of this, like as I was reading more and more, it just like dawned on me that, hey, maybe I should just go to grad school for AI and really, really learn it in a structured way. And I think we can kind of come back to one of the questions you initially asked me, right? Is college really necessary? Can you learn things by yourself? Do boot camps work? And I think, of course, in many cases they can, but for something as deeply technical as AI, ML, and all the maths that's required, all the foundational knowledge that's required, I think really not. Like I think it becomes really difficult. Of course, there's a lot of people who can do it, and there are parts you can of course study about and do it yourself. But like the holistic experience that university gives you is just very different. So then towards the tail end of 2020, while I was at home during COVID, that's when I thought, okay, let me use my time more productively. Let's apply to grad schools. I applied to a handful of grad schools, including at Carnegie Mellon, which was my number one school that I wanted to get into. And lo and behold, in February of 2021, I got an admission offer from Carnegie Mellon's Masters of AI program, which I was like
Right.
delighted to accept. And I decided, yeah, that's going to be the next phase of my life. And I'm going to dedicate the next 2 years to really just like put my head down and learn AI. Like the foundations of it, the math behind it, the applications, and just like almost like fuse together two of my skill sets. One being, of course, my software engineering background, and then, of course, like the newly acquired AI skill set that I'd been trying to hone, but I would be much better at post grad school.
Yeah. Wow. So what was grad school like?
Oh, I think unlike anything ever, like I think it's just very difficult to describe, but like, the environment at Carnegie Mellon, it's super, super academic. Everyone around me, like my classmates, they were brilliant. Some of the professors who were teaching courses at School of Computer Science at Language Technologies Institute, they were renowned for, and still are renowned for in the industry for AI, for natural language processing, for generative AI. Like we were studying generative AI and prompting before ChatGPT was a thing. Like I was in a class studying good prompting techniques, how to be a good prompt engineer, even before ChatGPT was a thing, because
Wow.
large language models were already around before that.
Mhm.
So being at Carnegie Mellon, we were at the cutting edge, and I spoke to a bunch of my other former classmates with me in undergrad of like how their grad school was, because a bunch of my former undergrad classmates were also in US studying at different colleges like at Georgia Tech, at University of Chicago, at multiple other universities. And I used to speak with them like, how are your classes like? What classes are you taking? What electives are you taking? What does your day-to-day look like in college? Because, I think I was like really fascinated by all these like famous universities I've heard about. And time again, like a lot of the feedback that I got from my ex-classmates was just that the number of AI classes the universities taught were very, very limited. In many cases, they were just the classes were uh, the simple ones, or like with pretty standard names like deep learning, computer vision, natural language processing, just as much as that. Whereas at Carnegie Mellon, because just the sheer amount of faculty we had, there were a ton of courses just apart from the basic ones. There were like very focused courses on like advanced NLP, deep reinforcement learning, and artificial intelligence and future markets. Like how do you commercialize AI? And just tons of things on specific topics of AI, of like how do you combine multimodal AI and all these topics that other colleges, not every college was able to teach their students because they just didn't have the faculty or the bandwidth to do it. And I think that's why like studying at CMU at Carnegie Mellon just became like an amazing place, because there was just tons of opportunities, really smart people, professors, students, and everyone. And I feel because Pittsburgh is kind of like a smaller town,
Mhm.
there were like less distractions too. So I could like really keep my head down, work 12 plus hours a day on studies, assignments, my college jobs that I was doing, and just like improve as a person in doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds awesome. So the takeaway I saw was if you want to be at the cutting edge in your field, then the university matters, or knowing what professors are at the universities and or how the classes are taught. Is that what do you say about that?
I would say like it's just almost like it's about the first principles, right? Like the top universities are top for a reason, because they are pushing out students who are going into the industry, going into academia, and really making an impact. And then it comes back to them boosting the reputation of the university, and then better people going in there, better faculty going to there, more money pouring into the university, and then it's just like a feedback loop. So yeah, it really matters.
Wow.
Yeah, I also want to add, like, I see people doing like one mistake all the time that I see people regretting is that sometimes people take a lower ranking college because maybe the fee is less, or they're getting a scholarship from like a lower ranking college. Now, of course, at the end of the day, these ranks really don't matter. Like in many cases, like, there's tons of studies on like how, there's no difference between like rank 5 and rank 20. But in many cases, like it does materialize through subtle things of like who your classmates become, or how, or what kind of resources the university has. All of these are like tangible differences that might not be visible superficially, but you only experience them by the time you finish the program. So whoever, like, whenever people reach out to me on LinkedIn, or, some juniors from undergrad reach out, like, how do they decide between two programs? I really tell them, like, you might not be regretting going for a better college if it's costing you $10,000 more today. It might not even matter tomorrow, like those $10,000. It might really matter that you did the best for yourself, and you will get the ROI for it sooner.
All right. You heard that here. Strive to go to the top. All right. So let's move on to after your master's. So where'd you end up after that?
Yeah. So actually, even during my master's, I kept working with a bunch of financial institutions. But in my final year of grad school, like it was a two-year long grad school at Carnegie Mellon in the Master's of AI program, like 4 semesters. But towards the end of it, I decided to join StubHub, which is a big ticket platform for live events in the US. It's a global company, but with a big presence in the US, and specifically headquartered in New York. So I liked that because I interned in New York City. I liked what the vibe of the company. I liked that what I even spoke with my hiring manager, because my hiring manager, Sergey, like he was a guy who really had a vision for the data platform at StubHub, where he saw like someone like me who had like a background with software and skill set of AI, of like me coming in and working in the data platform team and just like building a ton of AI capability, like be like this AI guy in a team of software engineers, and just like do interesting things or like solve difficult problems that could be done with big data. And I like that challenge because I'd never worked as like almost like a data engineer. Never worked on like in a data platform team before. So I like the challenge. I like the thing that StubHub, even though it's like a massive company in terms of revenue, it was still like less than 200 engineers. And so the hierarchy was pretty flat. There was lots to do. And it had like almost like a Netflix-like culture where the expectations are to always exceed expectations, which, recursively can mean like, no matter how much you do, there's more to be done. And so for a young guy like me, I like that, there's always more to do, there's more to achieve. And I just went for it.
Yeah. And can you talk about what you did at StubHub?
Yes.
Like specific, like a project that you worked on?
Yeah, gladly. So at StubHub, as I mentioned, I was part of the data platform team. I was heavily working with Snowflake as a data platform back then. And I was initially I was getting my hands dirty with some simple things of like building data pipelines, building these data products, like these tables and all of the things that are required by analytics engineers or software engineers or finance teams at the company. But that's where, again, I saw an opportunity. So like 2 months in, 3 months into the company, I saw an opportunity that there were a lot of back and forth where people from the non-technical stakeholders of the company, they would reach out to my team and I. Again, my team was just really small of like 4 people. So non-technical stakeholders of the company would reach out to my team and they would ask us to deliver them like a different kind of data table or modify a dashboard or get them results to a specific query. And because this was, again, like for context, this was July of 2023, um, ChatGPT was out there. Like LLMs were like almost a year in being like mainstream. So I thought, hey, like we're getting all of these almost natural language queries. And what these people need is some kind of a way to convert their natural language queries into SQL queries that can query our database or query our data warehouse and give them the results. Either that result might be one number, might be a table, might be a data visualization, could be a multiple number of things. But I saw it as a thing that, okay, this problem can be automated by doing something known as text to SQL. And so this was like the first AI solution I worked on at StubHub, where I built an app, like a pretty janky Streamlit app to begin with for POC to see, like, hey, let's try proof of concept of like, do people even need this in the company? And so I built this query engine where users could type a natural language query. For example, like, which are the top 5 event sales over the last week that we sold tickets for? And boom, like it's going to write a query. It knows what are the most popular tables, where to pull data from. It's going to write a Snowflake SQL query the database, and give the result back and just explain what it did. And again, this was almost like a GPT wrapper application, which, now that you think of it in 2025, seems super simple, but it really, really automated a bunch of things. And it was like my first AI project win at the company.
Yeah, you built text to SQL to visualization before others did. Is that right? Is that kind of right? Or is that?
You could say that because since this was in July, like a few months later, Snowflake came out with something they were calling Snow Pilot, which could, again, like you could write natural language queries, it would convert them to SQL, fetch the result, and give you the answer, which came out a few months later. So, yeah, you could say we did it first in a way.
You did it first. StubHub did it first. Rana did it first. Okay. Wow. Yeah, it's awesome. And then, so was there any other interesting things at StubHub that you worked on, or should we move on to Microsoft?
No, quite a few again. Like, during my 1 year at StubHub, like it was pretty hectic. There was a ton of things that I got to work on. I could just like briefly touch on some of them, but
yeah, go for it.
I think the overarching theme for all of them was that it was always about me seeing a problem, seeing how it can be solved, and then applying AI to it, not seeing it the other way. So for me, like AI was just another way for automation. So for example, I started seeing that in our data platform, there was a bunch of situations where PII data, which is like personally identified information, our existing systems to catch that would not be able to catch that for unstructured data. And again, I saw this as like a great application of AI, specifically small language models, because I felt that smaller language models, they can really get to work and they can be super cheap. They can be uncensored, so they can really comply better with instructions, and they can almost like classify and give like a prediction for, is this data sensitive or not for unstructured data? No matter what the field says, what it looks like, it's not going to be looking at very specific rules or heuristics to be able to judge that. And so that became like a big project of mine to be able to make this PII data classification system with LLMs or SLMs, which is small language models.
Yeah,
in other words,
I feel like that would be useful everywhere.
Yeah, it is. It is a pretty cool thing that I built. Then another cool thing was I saw a problem where my team and I, again, we were just like 4 or 5 people. Because we were the data platform team, almost everyone in the company, every technical engineer in the company would write pull requests for my team and I to review to deploy automation tasks onto Snowflake, onto the data platform. It almost became a thing where more than, like 20, 30 pull requests needed to be reviewed in a week, which is almost like 4 or 5 in a day. And in many cases, it just adds up, like especially if you have to write comments about low-hanging things of like best code practices not being followed or simple feedback that can be done. And so again, I saw this as a problem of like, okay, let's combine CI/CD, which is continuous integration and continuous deployment, with an AI tool. So I built a system where we could give automated feedback to users on their pull requests, on their code changes, and just give them feedback of what they might need to change. And this initially started off as very simple things of like being able to summarize a pull request, because in many cases people didn't even write a summary, or being able to add a comment about if anything was wrong or if anything deviated from stylistic changes. This also included some non-AI things of like linting people's SQL. So linting is a big thing in the software world, where given a particular language like Python, SQL, all of these things, there is a certain structure to it. There's a certain code style to it. So enforcing that can really improve the quality of a code base. So all of these things were done by me in order to just like automate the process of like, okay, time is limited for my teammates and I. Let's try reviewing and giving feedback that only humans can, and leave the low-hanging fruit to the large language models.
Yeah, that's cool. So is that project what led you to Microsoft? How'd you get to Microsoft?
Yeah, I think
let's start there.
Yeah, implicitly, of course, but not exactly. So actually, over the summer of 2024, I thought like, I was looking for jobs. So I thought, all right, which are the top companies, which are the top AI companies I'd like to work at. So I sat down over a weekend. I made a list of like, okay, these are all right, roughly like the 100, 200 companies I would probably be happy to be working at, because I saw like at StubHub, my manager left the company in February of 2024. And I saw like consequently in the next 2 months, like even by April of 2024, that a lot of the build decisions started to be converted into buy decisions, which gave me a clear signal that, okay, my next best work is ahead of me. So I need to be on the lookout for what I need to do instead. And so that's when I made the list of the companies. That's when I decided, okay, let me go full throttle, apply to a bunch of companies and see what happens. I was fortunately incredibly successful with my job hunting over the summer. I, again, like applied to like 200 companies. I got a callback rate of like almost like to 30%. Had a ton of interviews with the top companies, and I was able to bag in like almost like 10 different offers from all these top companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Palantir, and all these like really, really good offers. And then I ended up deciding Microsoft because, as I mentioned to you about like how Fabric as a product seemed really cool to me, because it was a competitor to Snowflake. So I could really use my existing skills sort of working as a data engineer, working with big data, working as a data scientist, working as an AI engineer. All of these things would be really required in this multifaceted role. And so it really allured to me. Although looking at Palantir's success, I kind of, like, I don't know, like in hindsight, maybe if I would have taken Palantir, I would have been significantly richer. But no, Microsoft did come out with like a really good profile. Like the team was good. Really, I could see what my hiring manager was working on and telling me. It really turned out to be true. So I would say like, yeah, it was definitely a good decision. But yeah, Palantir stock growth it makes me question that decision sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends on what you want. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So you're just going if you're just going to money, or if you're going for learning or some other goal. What gives you the motivation to learn AI and be in this space?
I think I'm naturally a super curious person, and I love building things. So I love the way today's AI technology is. Like in many cases, AIs are just like an LLM. Like an LLM is just an API away. In many cases, people are building agents or software tools that you can even just clone from a GitHub repo, run it on your laptop, see what it can do things with it. I just like love that experience, because an AI is like, again, like an automation for me. So I can use it to simplify my life, do a bunch of things. And I just find that whole process really, really cool. It also because I really like doing things by myself, I also bought like a very beefy laptop 3 years back when I was in grad school to be able to run these AI models on my laptop. So I'm like a big proponent of like even running open source models, because I can run them on my M1 Mac and just do a bunch of things locally, like create agents, see how they interact, try different prompts, and just do a ton of things. Now, because of my curiosity, one of the ways I almost like maybe nurture it or give it a venting place is by going to hackathons where I actually get to build stuff. Like my life at hackathons has been like almost like a parallel life that I live in terms of spending my weekends there, in terms of like building cool ideas that might or might not be very practical, just like in those hackathons to see what the reaction is like, or if I built it, how things would have been. So I've been super into the hackathon scene ever since 2015, ever since undergrad. So I've been on the scene for like 10 years. I've been fortunate enough to like win a ton of them, like more than like 10 hackathon wins, more than 40 participations and whatnot. But
Wow.
these days I'm mostly judging at hackathons, judging at university hackathons. But I still
wow,
like, I
that's
still
cool.
love the energy around it, and I love giving back to the community. So last weekend I was in Providence, Rhode Island. I was judging Brown University's hackathon. This weekend I'm in Boston. I'll be judging Northeastern University's hackathon. So just
Oh,
love the
cool.
energy around it and seeing what people are building.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds fun. Interesting that you pivoted from doing, are you still doing the hackathons, or are you just judging now?
So I judge university hackathons because I can't participate in them, and I love the
Right,
energy
right, right.
about university hackathons. But if it's like a
Mhm.
hackathon for professionals, I do take part. So for example, in November, I was in SF taking part in like an NVIDIA hosted hackathon, and it was like they were calling it world's shortest hackathon. It was just like 2 hours, and I
Mhm.
was there. I was hacking. My teammate and I, we came in. I want to say like third, like top five. We got featured for it, and we built like just this pretty interesting Chrome extension that could see the web page, could see the styling of the web page, and would allow you to just alter the styling of the web page. So if you're a web developer, rather than you having to think, okay, what colors would go well with each other, or how can I change styling of my website to basically give it a theme,
Mhm.
that Chrome extension would just use an LLM to make your thoughts into reality. For example, like if you like the Bing homepage and you imagine that if the Bing homepage was in the 1800s, like Midwest theme, so the Chrome extension would do that for you. And so we were able to build it in 2 hours using AI tools. And that was the whole point of the hackathon. And I just love the energy about it. And I just love that, wow, I was able to do it. And it was something for,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fun. That's a cool project. And do you just fly around to these hackathons
yeah,
on your own?
sometimes fly around, sometimes drive, sometimes the hackathons um, reimburse the flights. For example, a few years back, I flew from India to Singapore and from India to Switzerland. In both those cases, like the hackathon organizers, they like shortlisted a bunch of people, and they paid me to fly out and attend the main event.
Wow.
And
Wow,
then,
that's awesome.
unfortunately, my team and I were able to win those two events, and so after winning those events, we won even more prizes. So that was even better.
It's an extra benefit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that sounds fun. Yeah, so you hack away on the side and at your job. You're like super focused.
Yeah.
This is like your life.
Yeah, I think I've literally learned to embrace it. I definitely do a ton more than just hack away everywhere. But I feel the reason hackathons are so much fun is because I get to make things that I don't get to do at work. Because, like life of a software engineer or even an AI engineer, sometimes it can get, you have to do things that are required in terms of like building CI/CD pipelines or go through reviews or create project plans and strategies, build system design, and all these things with like tons of reviews in the middle. It's not just like you're coding 8 hours a day. It's very different. But in a hackathon, you don't need to worry about all of that. You don't need to think about like the long-term plan, creating a Jira board, creating a CI/CD pipeline. It's just like, all right, go, go, go. Within 2 hours or 24 hours or 12 hours, you just convert an idea into reality. And it just reminds me of like what being a software engineer is like, and just what being an engineer is like. So the experience I love. And I think that's why I keep telling people to go to more and more hackathons and learn more, use your skill set, use your brain. Like it's just a win-win in every aspect.
I think hackathons are the way to like express yourself, get out of the corporate grind in a way sometimes. So I have a question for you. Today, a lot of people are saying, well, AI is kind of going extremely fast these days. Some people in college or in high school, they want to get into tech. AI is really cool, but they don't know what the jobs are going to be like when they graduate or what's going to happen, and if their skills that they're going to acquire are going to be obsolete. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I think I definitely don't have a definitive answer on what might be possible. I sometimes do think, like, it is a real possibility that someone who's entering college today to study software engineering, 4 years later when they come out, if everything stays the same in terms of education, what they're learning in college, their skills will be obsolete in 4 years. But then, like, I also look back at what happened to my time in grad school. Like, I was in grad school from August of 2021 to May of 2023. During this time, Copilot, like GitHub Copilot was launched, like a coding assistant. During this time, ChatGPT was launched. During this time, the GPT API was launched. And I could see how the college curriculum evolved as it was happening. I mean, I guess I kind of know, like, okay, partially the reason curriculum evolved is because the university and the professors were really at the cutting edge, so they could adapt.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, like, if you're active, I would say if you want to be future proof, just stay in the know. Like, be on LinkedIn, be on Twitter, use these tools, see what's happening, because the best thing you can do is just be aware of the advancements and use them as tools rather than just thinking that, oh wow, OpenAI released the operator agent and I know it can control the web, but I'm just not going to use it. Like, if you just don't use it, you'll never know, and you can't think beyond it, right? Like, think about how do you advance knowing what you know, and it's just a gradual process. So I would say it is a real possibility that yes, we don't know what's going to happen to software engineering jobs in 4 years, but hey, you have to keep trying. Like, what else would you do, right? What is the alternative?
Yeah. What is the alternative? Do you have any advice to anyone that is looking at different career paths? They don't know if they want to go in tech. Maybe they do want to go in tech. Any advice to anyone?
So, like, it definitely depends on like where you're at in life to decide where to go. I think for me, I would definitely think about like one North Star that people can't go wrong with is that if you're indecisive, just follow the money. Like, your regrets will be less. It's as simple as that, right? Like, in many cases, a path where you're going to get more money and you're indecisive, like, you're just going to have less regrets towards the end of the day.
There you go. Follow the money if you're indecisive. We're nearing the end. Is there anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I do want to say, like, a bunch of things we discussed today, including how to stay relevant in the market, staying up to date with AI news, new tools, like what announcements companies are making, even like updating your resume and like staying on top of the job market on like best practices. Like, follow me on LinkedIn. I'm really active. I try to post multiple times a week so that you have the best news, and just like share my experiences actually working in the industry, actually applying to jobs, actually seeing like how I could improve my resume. And I post about it all the time, like even things like best prompt tips and whatnot. So stay active on LinkedIn, keep learning, and just don't be in a silo. What I mean is, like, don't just, hang out with the same group of friends. Don't just, stay in your comfort zone of not trying to learn new things, right? It's super easy to spend day in, day out just watching things on YouTube or Netflix, which are like comedy shows or, fictional movies. But the way you learn about new things and the way you grow is by just knowing what else is out there, by meeting new people at tech events, at networking events, by being active on productive social media. Like, LinkedIn is, of course, arguably productive, and even X is arguably productive. But if you're following the right people, if you are able to tune your algorithm, you can really start learning a lot more. You can get the competitive part of your brain racing by seeing hey, people are doing all these cool things. How do you do those cool things? And just like, you need to push yourself out of the comfort zone and don't be in that silo of like the same friend circle, same things that you do, same activities that you do.
All right. You heard it here from Rana. We'll have his LinkedIn profile in the show notes below. Yeah. And thanks for coming on. Thanks for coming on, Rana.
My pleasure.
Excellent.